All right, so for week 4, we were talking about performance and the differences of being in groups. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about the TED Talk that we were assigned to watch because I've found a lot of what Mina was saying very interesting, especially when she was saying right in the beginning that we tend to draw boundaries between us and them. And I feel like we see that kind of in everyday living, whether it's in work, school, being in a group of friends, that it's easier to become a collective and be like, oh, this is our group. What are they doing? And people tend to kind of behave more aggressively when they're in groups and when they see themselves as pitted against or challenging the other group, even if there's no challenge presenting itself. I've noticed at my job, so I'm a medical assistant, we have the medical receptionists, the medical assistants, and then the providers. And it does get very us and them, even though we're all working towards the same goal of providing the best patient care we can, best patient experience, and keeping the office flowing. We all are doing the same end result. The front desk will check the patients in, the medical assistants will do the intake, the providers will provide the medical care. But we tend to, within my company, have oh, well, the medical receptionists didn't do this, or the medical assistants are complaining about that. And we group each other in that title when sometimes it's not necessarily fair. It's not all the medical assistants or all the receptionists doing the things we're complaining about. It's not all the doctors not signing off their notes as fast as we want them to. But it is a mindset of us versus them. I've noticed because I do get along with everyone in my job, if I'm sitting talking to one of the receptionists, we're fine one on one. But the second I get in the group of the medical assistants and we're aggravated about something, the language does switch into, oh, well, the receptionists did that. Or I hear them being like, oh, well, the medical assistants didn't send that. And it's crazy to see that dynamic switch when it goes into the group versus the individual. And I feel like that's more so because we see group members more so as a collective than the individual. In saying things like, oh, well, the receptionist didn't do that, I would never be like, oh, like Rachel didn't do that or Rachel never checks people in. Because then that's her. Like, I don't feel that way towards the specific person. So it's really interesting to see how you kind of take a step back and take out the kind of just we are individual people even though we're in a collective group. And one of the examples that Mina gave in the TED Talk was that research showed it's easier for people to assign others to drink the hot sauce. Sorry, it's easier for them to assign people like drink the hotter hot sauce than when they're in individual like by themselves making that decision. And I believe that they just don't want to take that personal choice. Even if in the group someone has the yes, let's do it, it's easier for that person to be able to make that decision because people might back them up, or to be able to back them up because it's not like, oh, this person chose that. It's, oh, group A chose that. So the question about success in groups, I'm very far away from my 8th grade class. But when I think of groups and success, I really think back to in 8th grade, we had to do our 8th grade science project was the roller coaster project. I'm not sure if anyone else had the same assignment, but it was very, you're on your own, decide everything. We got to pick our own groups. We weren't assigned to it. So everyone kind of grouped up with their friends and you had to create a roller coaster. There were a few requirements. It had to meet like a certain height, it had to go a certain distance, and there had to be like one loop. But everything else was up to you, and you were graded on how effective it was if the marble got from point A to point B, and also the creativity. Like every roller coaster project had its own theme. So it was very just make it your own. It's funny how I think of this story as a success in groups because in the beginning it did not start that way. I think the max people you could have was 6 because that's how my group first started, which is kind of a lot, which is funny because it did not work out. It was me and these 5 other girls. We came together, and in the process of trying just to create a theme, we realized we couldn't agree. Just to create where we want to put the one loop because of everything like related to it, we couldn't agree. And every step of the way, just in the beginning phase, we could not agree. So we tried to compromise and tried to come up with things. People were mad. We went to buy our supplies and we couldn't even decide on our supplies as we're actively in the store. Like one of our parents had to drive us and we were still fighting. So that first day, we decided this is not working out. And it did become like an us them within one group. And that's kind of when we realized like this isn't happening, and we separated. So we actually ended the project doing 3 and 3. And after that split, it's not the best example because like the first group didn't work. But after that split, that specific group of 3 that I was now in, the most successful. And we didn't just go along with one person said like, oh, let's make it blue, and we're all like, yes. We still compromised, we still switched our opinions, and if I wanted one thing, someone wanted the other, we would choose hers and then mine the next. It was just such a cohesive project, and we were then like rooting for our friends in the other group of 3 because we were no longer clashing opinions. Like we obviously wanted them to be successful, and at the end both projects were great. We both got A's on them. It was completely fine. It all worked out. And it didn't affect our friendship after, but I feel like if we stayed in that assignment together, it probably would not have been good, clearly based on how it was going like day 1. So when it comes to people not wanting to, one, give it their all in groups, but then at the end of the day not wanting to admit that they're not giving it their all, I think it's really about like self-preservation. People don't want to be like, oh yes, it's me, I'm the one not like picking up the slack, I'm the one not doing the assignment and you guys are. One, they might just not want anyone to look at them like that. Like they don't want someone to be mad at them because they're slacking, and they just could also not want to be judged. It's easier to fall more so like take a step back in a group if you see other people doing the work and you see the assignment getting done. And if you just don't fully want to give it the maximum effort because the other 2 people are doing it all, it's easier to just sit back and let them do it. But then when you get questioned, you're gonna be defensive and be like, no, I'm doing it, I'm part of that, because you don't want to be looked at as wrong. Which, again, in my current position, it is strange how people just don't want to take fault or take blame. The medical assistants, were all assigned either 1 or 2 exam rooms that we are in charge of stocking at the end of the week, just making sure everything's fully stocked. So throughout the week, someone might grab a box of gloves, finish it, and we've noticed recently that things aren't getting replaced. They are empty boxes, or there's no band-aids, there's none of the surgical equipment, and the doctors are now starting to get mad, and we're not holding up our end of our job. So we all came together to discuss this and ways that we can figure out how to fix it, how to make sure all the rooms are adequately stocked. And we brought up the point of like, hey, if you take the last box, just like in like everyday life, if you take the last thing, replace it or throw it away, don't leave the empty box. And it's funny to see how we know it's happening. We know that there's an empty box left or that the band-aids weren't refilled. But every single person in this group is saying, no, I refill it every time. I've never left a box. I always replace it. Until finally someone's like, well, maybe one time I left it, and then they fall into that group sense of following, of then the next person's like, well, yeah, I'm sure there's another time I left something. But the initial, you don't want to admit that you're the one to get in trouble or doing the wrong thing or not doing it as good as the others. Which I get it, because I also will be like, no, I fully restock my rooms too, when I know I don't. But who is that harming? I just feel like we should admit to it to help move the group better, more efficiently, and come to realization of, hey, if you admit that you're not doing your end, what can we collectively do to help that? Or maybe you should switch your task or take on a different part of it. Which also leads me into kind of the final of, I even the like negatives of groups, I still think getting put into teams or put into groups can be beneficial at the end of the day of getting work done, even with like social loafing, coming together, not wanting to do the work or taking the step back. I feel like we can get past that by one, realizing the members of what's happening, that the work's not getting done, and either as a group or maybe whoever takes the leadership role or management, if it's a company job, company group, and assign roles that coincide with people's abilities. Like if they have a skill, give them a task that follows or highlights that skill. Or if they have an interest, give them something that would pique that interest, but that's still working towards the group goal of getting whatever it is you're trying to get done completed. That could help the individual group members feel more motivated or feel more desire to be part of the group and get the teamwork done. So I don't think people should just, oh, I had a bad time in a group, I don't want to work in one again. I think they are beneficial, and there are steps we can take to keep them beneficial and keep it productive and going. Thanks for listening.